All right, good morning and welcome to AGAPE. We had a few technology issues there just for a moment, but we are back and ready to go live and come to you this morning from our family room here at AGAPE. Some of you may, if you're watching this, you may have been in this room before. It's been recently renovated, but it's certainly a room where we are very proud of, and so much of the work of AGAPE is done inside of the walls here. This is a place where we often have our family counseling sessions. It's also a room where adoption visits often occur. Foster families see their children for the very first time that they will be caring for in their home. And this is also a room where we use very often for children who come in and meet with their biological families during visits and so forth. So a lot of emotion, a lot of sadness, but a whole lot of joy occurs in this room. And we've chosen this room to do our Facebook Lives here over the next 3 weeks. Today, we're going to be talking to Dr. Jason Cooper. Dr. Cooper is the clinical director here at AGAPE. 5 years, Jason?
Getting ready for 5 years.
For 5 years, getting pretty close to 5 years, and 4.5. So been a great asset to AGAPE. As I've often said, Jason came to us providentially. God just led him to us through some close relationships that we had, and we were very thankful and grateful for the work he's done here in the leadership of our counseling and psychological services program here. So we're thank you for being here. We thank you for joining us, or later on for watching at a different time. We'll see how all this live stuff goes, but again, thank you for joining us. If you do come on while we're live, please share with us who you are and just where you're from, and just let us know that you're here, and let others maybe who are watching see that as well. And so we're going to go ahead and kick this off and get going. We have a few questions that have been selected from various people. We're going to try to answer those. If you have questions that you would like to have answered from one of our therapists here, from Dr. Cooper, please feel free to either leave those questions on the Facebook post here, or you can also send us a question at info@agapenashville.org. Again, that's info@agapenashville.org. Jason, you ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
All right.
Let's go.
Well, first question I want to ask you is, well, first of all, just tell us a little bit about you. You know,
Okay.
4.5 years ago,
Right.
I think our good friend Dr. Snow?
Dr. Scott.
Dr. Scott.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Dr. Frank Scott. Dr. Frank Scott sent me a out of nowhere resume when I thought,
Right.
oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And so that was our first communication. Well, it was probably almost 5 years ago. But
Right.
but just tell us a little bit about you. I think you have kind of a unique background, and I think our folks would like to hear
Okay.
that. So.
Well, I grew up as a preacher's kid, and had, in case my parents are watching, great parents, fantastic family. Grew up in Ohio, lived in West Virginia a little bit. My brother, my younger brother, was born in West Virginia, but we lived mostly in Ohio. I graduated from high school in Ohio, and then thought I'd like to work on an undergraduate degree at Lipscomb University in Tennessee, and so made the trek down to Nashville. Lipscomb is where I met Martha Nestor, and we became friends, and then eventually married in 1993. And after completing my degree in Bible at Lipscomb,
It probably didn't hurt that her family lived right across the street from school, and you probably got some free home cooked meals that way.
and free laundry services.
There you go.
So that was a bonus. Not the only reason for that relationship, but definitely a bonus. So after completing the undergraduate degree in Bible and a minor in psychology, I went to Tribeca, and it was during that time that we married. It was 1993, and so she followed me to Ohio in 1995 to go pursue a doctorate in counseling psychology. And we really started off in a tiny little house in Akron, Ohio, and she taught while I continued to work toward the end of my degree. But then, surprisingly enough, and pretty unexpected in terms of our thoughts about where our careers would go, in 2002, I graduated, got my diploma on a Saturday, and then on Monday morning, the following Monday morning, I found myself at Commissioned Officer Training School at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. And that was the beginning of an Air Force career for 7 years, working as a clinical psychologist. And during that time, I received my license in Nebraska and really started my career there, working with active duty members of the military services and occasionally their families. I worked in the military hospital there, so I would work in primary care and in the emergency room. And then at the end of that 7 years, my son Ryan was 2 years old, and as I told everybody, it seemed like he liked me. I liked him. We liked spending time together, and so it really seemed like it was time to leave the Air Force and focus on some other things. So I started a private practice with a friend of mine in Florida, and that went very well. I also did some contracting work and consulting for law firms and for nursing homes and for other private practices during that time. And then, as you said, all of a sudden, February 2016, things changed. In a few email exchanges, I found out that there was an opportunity here in Nashville again, and that was exciting. And so, talking with my wife about how exciting that could be to return to Nashville after 20 years, really. And so that's what brought us here, and it has been it's been a great 4.5, almost 5 years. Definitely some challenges along the way, but also just interesting to return to Nashville after so long.
Well, you returned a little sooner than I did. It took me 30 years to get back to Nashville after graduating from Lipscomb many years ago. So I wanted to just ask you a few questions, just about counseling in general, about the counseling program and services here. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time today, but I do just want to kind of give some people sort of a little insight into just counseling and again being here. So first thing I want to ask you kind of an odd question maybe, but what's a counseling session like?
Right.
What is it like? So a lot of people probably have never been to a counseling session. Maybe wonder, well, what is that even like? And what goes on? And they close that door and sit apart from each other. What's a counseling session like?
Right. Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I do think we get some wrong impressions from television, movies, or sometimes the books that we read. And so this is really a question I'd love to answer because I think that could probably allay a lot of people's fears about what counseling might be like. Because when you look on television or in the movies, you see a lot of different ways that therapy gets portrayed, and sometimes it looks like you're going to make the person who is the client really nervous or embarrassed, or you're going to ask them to do things that they think would be silly or strange, or the therapist acts unethically or does things that are illegal in their portrayal in the movies or on film. And so in reality it's a lot different. First of all, we're very focused on developing a relationship and getting to know the person, and I think that surprises people at first, that especially that very first session and maybe the first few sessions, our therapists are, and I think therapists in general are very focused on just getting to know you and developing a relationship and trying to understand who you are completely as much as possible in a very short period of time, but starting to think toward what is it that really will be beneficial for you, but in the context of developing a relationship. And so those first few visits really are a lot of just asking questions and getting to know you. And those questions are things that clients already know. They know about themselves. And so that shouldn't be too high pressure, but it really is our opportunity to get our first understanding of what that person is really like and what they have happening in their life, and starting to think about how we can really help. But after we start developing some goals, and that can take a while, that can take a session, that can take 2 or 3 sessions, depending on what's really needed. There can be, as you would imagine, the stories that we are told and the things that are happening in people's lives can be pretty involved, so that can take a while. to understand exactly what's happening for this person and how we can help. But it doesn't have to be that long, and sometimes that happens very quickly. But once we've really thought about what goals are we going to work toward, we start focusing on our work, and our work can look a lot different depending on circumstances, of course. But in general, we agree on the goals that we want to work toward. Perhaps it's developing communication skills so that relationships can get better. And so each session from then on, we're really thinking about how we're communicating so that we can work on our communication skills together. I may teach a little bit, or so therapists may offer some teaching about skills or education about skills, and we may practice those together. But there's also the benefit of this relationship as it continues to develop. We can hold each other accountable. And that's something that if you really just think about how in our own personal lives, knowing that we're accountable to somebody else, and in the case of our relationship therapeutically, nobody else outside of therapy has to know that you're working on those goals, or that there is this person who's helping and guiding along the way.
So in a sense, you can't really help somebody if you don't know somebody.
I think that's pretty true.
So you mentioned these goals, working on these goals and nobody else. Talk to us a little bit about, give assurance to folks just about the confidentiality of counseling.
Right. Well, and that's the other part that I think is really important. Sometimes people will think about a counselor as being their friend or this hired friend that works for them. And there is an element, I think, where friendship sort of develops because it is a relationship. But this is a different relationship. This would be like having a friend who has to work under a code of ethics and who is bound by the laws and the rules of the state of Tennessee. And so because of that, this is a professional. And because of that, there are things like confidentiality that we have to respect, and we would want to anyway. And so that makes us a lot different than maybe a friend or a family member that you're confiding in, because with us and with a counselor, you do have that assurance that unless you really want us to share information, or unless we legally have to share information, that information is going to be kept between the two of us. And that is a nice assurance if you're pouring your heart out to somebody. And I think just that alone can be a huge benefit to a person who's struggling and wondering, where do I go next? And is it okay to open up about all the decisions I'm trying to make and really take a hard look at those decisions? Because to share those with a friend or a family member can sometimes be a little frightening.
I've always felt like, if all you did, if you were coming to counseling, all you did was close the door, sit down, and bare your soul for 45, 50 minutes, and the counselor never said a thing, that would be therapy. that would be really good therapy. But to have the professional skills and training to then be able to help walk them through that journey of the things that they're challenged, that many of us are all challenged with. We just haven't quite figured out that we necessarily could benefit from counseling. So Jason, tell us a little bit about what do we see here in our counseling program? What are the things? Why do people come to counseling? What do we see here in particular at AGAPE?
Well, there is a wide range, as you would expect. There's anything from relationship issues or situational stressors, particularly now with unemployment or underemployment. Financial stresses are affecting quite a number of people. But there's also just job changes, other life transitions, things that often people don't think that they need therapy for or would benefit from therapy to address, and yet those are great things to come to counseling for, to help go through a life transition and make sure that you feel comfortable and encouraged throughout that transition. But then also, as you would expect, things like anxiety, depression are often reasons that will cause somebody to come and ask for help as well. And so there's really this wide range. We do, premarital counseling, which is great because we love to help people prevent concerns that could grow as they enter that life transition and as they think about a lifelong commitment. And it's not uncommon to see a person at some life transition, and we help them during that period of time, like maybe premarital counseling as they enter into a marriage, but then also to see them later as they start thinking about starting a family. And so, and I mention that only to say that therapy doesn't have to be 10 years long. There may be times when we think, I would like to just have a little bit of help for this period of time, and then once I feel good and comfortable with what I'm about to do and enter into, then maybe I'll come back again later and start to address a new concern. And that's fine. And so, and actually that's great. I think we're most helpful when we can be proactive and think about how we can prevent future concerns. But to your point, I think we see lots of situational stressors, particularly right now. We're seeing lots of the situational stressors, but then also those things that might be classified as mood disorders or mood conditions like anxiety and depression.
You mentioned this season, this COVID worldwide pandemic of COVID-19. So I know that it's impacted us here. Maybe just talk a little bit about that, if you would, just a moment.
Right. It's definitely provided a new context for everybody around us, and it's affecting the therapists as well as the clients. It changes the way we deliver our services because we do virtual visits now. But as we've seen, really, almost all of our clients are saying that they're affected in some way by COVID-19.
Yeah.
And in fact, since September 1st, we've been asking every potential new client several questions about how they've been affected by COVID. Have they been affected occupationally and financially? Have they been affected socially? Have they been affected mentally by, or even physically by COVID-19? And almost 100%.
Yeah.
As I review those, I can only recall off the top of my head 2 potentially new clients who said they really weren't affected. And I think that's very telling about how far-reaching and how deep this pandemic is for us and our community. And we've noticed an increase in people requesting our services and people accessing our services. And so we've had that comparison from this year to last year, seeing a 33% increase in the number of sessions from year to year. And so I'm proud that we're able to serve. I'm proud that we seem to be meeting a need that's out there. But that need must really be tremendous. And it's only when you really look at the numbers, but then also sit in a session with somebody, that you begin to feel the weight of this pandemic on our community.
Yeah, we're often asked in our grant funding and other funding to be able to demonstrate how in those who've been affected by COVID, and my answer is always the same: it's everybody's been affected by COVID. Right. So I don't know anybody who hasn't been in some way, shape, or form. Well, as we kind of close out, I do want to ask you just a very open-ended question about just if you here at AGAPE, the counseling services that we provide, or just counseling in general, as we kind of close out, what would you like for people to know?
I would really like for people to know that we have continued this effort. I think in your involvement in our strategic plan back in 2017, one thing that we really wanted to do was start providing services intentionally to new populations, like our children in foster care. Mm-hmm. And I'm really proud of how the 2 departments, Social Services Department and our department, has been working together to serve these children. Just very quickly, just to know, I would want people to know that we take our work very, very seriously. And so just as that example of foster care counseling, those 11 kids that we currently have in our counseling care, we meet every Wednesday at 9 o'clock, and we're reviewing those children and their situation every week. And not only that, but praying for them.
Yes.
And spending that time in prayer for our clients. And you know, from our leadership team meetings, we're praying for our clients all the time. And I would want everybody to know that we spend our time, not just in the session, but outside of the session, thinking about how we can provide the best care possible. So for foster children, it means that we're working behind the scenes along with social services and having these meetings and planning and really carefully considering what we're doing. But then the same thing at Morningstar, which was something I don't think we really knew about in 2017.
No, we did.
But to start having an actual presence on the site, you know, to have a counselor there, and we started that with Dr. Angela Scruggs just, you know, for 2 days a week, but now to have Courtney Clardy there 4 days a week to provide services to the women and the children that are there and to be accessible to them, I think is something that I'm really proud of, that we've been able to do that. So again, just to wrap that up, I would say, you know, I would want people to know that we're not just doing the counseling in the session. We really are putting our heart into the work that we do, and it's not just you know, filling out paperwork. It's not just the documentation or the appointment scheduling. It really is that these relationships are important to us, and we pray about them, and we consult with each other about them, and we have meetings about them, and so the care that you get when you come here, I think, is a lot different than what you get at other places.
Well, and I would say too, just what you mentioned about our collaboration with counseling, sort of this overarching part with our foster care program, adoption program. It gives me, I will tell you, when I walk down our hall and I see the interaction of those groups together, it gives me a lot of joy. And because it hasn't always been that. We've always had a great counseling program, great social services program, but there wasn't necessarily all this collaborative effort there. To see that now is just gives me a lot of joy and a little bit of pride too. I'm not gonna lie. So, well, hey, we'll wrap it up. I think maybe there'll be some questions some people may want to send in, and we'll try to answer those as we do close up. I do want to just say a couple of things. One is I want our folks to know that a big part of what we do here. Dr. Kristen Schultz is one of our clinical psychologists here. We have a very robust testing program here. If we can help any of you with that at some point in time, we want to be able to provide that and offer that to you. Also, too, if counseling services is something you're considering, and finances is a part of why you've delayed to do that, please give us a call. We have grants, we have sliding fee scale. Part of our counseling mission is to provide professional Christian counseling to anyone that needs it, regardless of their ability to pay. So we want to encourage you to give us a call if we can help you in that way. As we close out, I just want to remind you, next week, I believe, next Friday, we'll do this again with Rachel Herman. Rachel is our Morningstar Domestic Violence Shelter manager and director out there, and she's going to talk a little bit answer some questions related to that. And then the following Friday, we will then be talking to Amy Parker. Amy is our social services director about our foster care and adoption program. So we hope you will join us again next Friday, and then the following Friday to hear just a little bit more about the behind the scenes of AGAPE. And we are kind of in the middle of this theme through the fall and into the beginning of next year that we refer to as AGAPE behind the scenes. So follow us on our social media. Claire Long is doing an outstanding job of posting things there, as well as if you don't currently follow us on our e-news, please let us maybe send us your email, so that we can add you to that as well. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for supporting AGAPE. We always continue to need financial support, but we want to encourage you to also be in prayer for our work as well. We'll have a little bit more to say about a very special prayer time that we will hold on December the 7th, which is 12/7. And so we look forward to telling you a little bit more about that in the future. Thank you for being with us today.